Hello, everyone, and welcome to Authoritas Tea Time SEO, where we encourage everyone to take a break at 4 p.m., the traditional tea time, to connect with others and learn something new. I'm SEO Joe Blogs from Authoritas, and I'm also joined by Carrie Shepherd here from Authoritas.
Hi, guys.
Today, we have something new in store for you. We have a host for Tea Time SEO this Friday. We have Jason Bernard, and he'll be hosting today's session with Dixon and Andrea. So I'm going to pass over to Jason to introduce himself and share his tips, and leave it to you guys.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank
happy
you.
to be here. Thank you for inviting me and allowing me to present. Thank you, Dixon, for turning up, and Andrea. I know you've got some great tips. I've actually had a sneak peek, and I'm pretty keen to hear what it is you're going to say over the slides. So I'm going to start all about knowledge graphs and knowledge panels, and then Dixon's second, and then Andrea's third. And this is an Authoritas webinar. So I didn't even know that slide was there. The second one caught me off guard. I'm Jason Barnard. I call myself the brand SERP guy, and I'm hoping other people will start calling me that soon as well. I collect brand SERPs for a living, almost, a very small living, but a living nonetheless. And I use the Authoritas API, which is brilliant. I'm a digital nomad, temporarily on hold in the south of France. And I've got a brand SERP course, which is for the moment starting to sell, but I'm not making a big living out of the brand SERPs just yet, so I still have to do some digital marketing consulting on the side. I'm going to go right into my quick tips. My first tip is one that I think is really important, is that Wikipedia is not necessary. Up until last year, perhaps it was. I don't think it was. I think the knowledge graph already had a lot of stuff in it that wasn't from Wikipedia. But certainly since last summer, what I call the Budapest update, Wikipedia is definitely not necessary. It's easy to get into the knowledge graph without Wikipedia, if you know how. I've actually started a collection through the Authoritas API of sources from knowledge panels that are not Wikipedia, 391 of them so far. And that's growing all the time. A month ago, it was only 140. That's because I've enlarged the database, got a bigger data set going. And as you can see in the knowledge panel, Wikipedia is only cited 60% of the time. 30% of the time, there is no citation at all. And behind that, there is more often than not no Wikipedia page. And the rest is from other sources. So we're looking at here, I'll have to add that, 20%. No, 10%, excuse me, from neither Wikipedia nor none, 40% that aren't from Wikipedia. And on the right there, you've got some of the sources that you can put your information into so that Google can crawl it, Google can find it, and bit by bit, Google will build up an opinion about who you are and what you do. And that's what the essential thing for having a knowledge panel is, that Google understands who you are and what you do, who you're related to, who your relationships are, and then it will start showing that as fact. The next is to know that knowledge panels are multi-sourced and multifaceted. If we look at this, it's Andrea and myself. We've been doing some experiments, pinging backwards and forwards with silly games about analyzing SERPs and brand SERPs and seeing how much we can mess with each other's knowledge panels. Andrea got himself onto mine, so I got myself onto his, as you can see down at the bottom there. And as you can see, I've got in through Wikipedia. So I had the easy way in, and that's what I would say about Wikipedia. It's the easy way in. Andrea took the hard way in, and he got in through WordLift and Crunchbase and various other sources. And WordLift is a very powerful tool for that I'm also using for my podcast. You can also see that the sources for the songs, for example, that's YouTube. YouTube is a source, and you can see that it's multifaceted. I've written some songs, so the songs are there. Andrea hasn't written any songs, but he gives great business advice through his video thingies, whatever they're called. What are they called, Andrea?
Cameos. These are the Google cameos. That's an experiment of Google, I think. I mean, not really roll out massively, but interesting enough.
I think it's fun. I mean, but that shows that Google thinks you're a worthy person to give cameo appearances to advise people about things, and I'm not. I'm just there to sing songs. And it also has the organizations he's founded. That's obvious information he's placed around the web that Google's got a grip on and can put in here, once again, without having a Wikipedia page. And you can see also it knows who my mother is, that I created Buwan Kuala, a TV series. They say movie, but it's a TV series. I've released albums, when I was born and which university I went to. And the third tip and the final tip for today is nurture your sprouts. This is a client of mine. We've been working on their Wikipedia page and their knowledge panel. We got that. And now we've got sprouts. And that's the two bosses of the company, Jacques Bonifay and Bertrand Salomon. And we're building those up. And what we've got is this little sprout of a knowledge panel. They're in the knowledge graph. And that's another interesting point, is to get a knowledge panel. Sometimes you can get a knowledge panel without being in the knowledge graph, and that may well be a delay between the moment the knowledge graph updates and the API throws back a result. And you can also grow these sprouts.
Sorry, can I ask a question about that? Did you mean that the right way around? Surely you can be in the knowledge graph without being in a knowledge panel. Or did you mean it that way around?
In fact, you can have it both way around. Thank you for that question. My sister, I found earlier on, I created her a site and added some information to some sites, and she got a knowledge panel like yesterday, and the API hasn't yet thrown back a result for her. So I think that's a delay in the time the knowledge graph itself updates and the knowledge panel updates and the API actually updates. But as you rightly say, the other way around is much more common. That's it for me. I've done my sprouts, I've done my knowledge graph, and I've done my knowledge panel. Almost it for me. And I've got a free tool where I track brand SERPs, knowledge panels, and knowledge graph presence. I use the Authoritas API, which is brilliant. I use WordLift, or I'm going to be using WordLift tools for analyzing the SERPs, and it's CaliQ Pro. And if you want to add your brand, please do, because it's actually a research project. And the more brands I get in there, the more honest that data set is going to be. So please do add yourself, add your competitors, add your events, add your products, and tell your friends to do it, share it. The URL is at the top there. The more I can get, the better the data gets, and the more we can learn as a community. Off you go, Dixon. Please introduce yourself.
So I've been around for doing SEO since about the same sort of time as Jason, and I'm the CEO of a thing called inlinks.net, which I notice I can't type as usual and can't spell. I'm also the brand ambassador of Magesta. I used to be CMO there, and I once had an agency as well back in 1999. Next slide then, please, Jason. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about is, rather than the knowledge panel of a person, because as Jason and Andrea probably know very well, mine is very, very poor. I wanted to talk about the knowledge graph, the wider knowledge base that Google has. And the first thing that I think is visualizing it is really, really helpful, because it's hard to explain. So this graph here, this chart here, if you look at the top line, that's a bunch of web pages. That's how the internet used to be. Google used to go and look at all those web pages, try and find the content on them, try and send back the best bit of information for your search. The problem is, as the web pages got from billions to trillions of records, that becomes a problematic system, and much better to start organizing the world's information by topics than it is by web pages, because it turns out there's only tens of millions, hundreds of millions of topics, or billions of topics, not trillions of topics. So therefore, most of the internet is duplicate content, in the sense that it's talking about the same thing. So I visualize Google's knowledge graph as a single access, direct access storage for a single point of truth for Google. And then the web pages can inform the single point of truth, and they can store everything based around the idea of topics, things, or entities, rather than just web pages. That also gives them the advantage of being able to feed in other data sources like lyrics, or manually putting in data, or internal data that can reference stuff and score things, or IMDb, or other bits and pieces, and the other data sources that Jason was talking about. So I think this is quite a good way of visualizing it, at least from my point of view. And if you could put the next slide on then, please. So then it becomes a question of how well does Google understand topics or named entities, and it turns out that it's still got a way to go. We have on Inlinks, we have a resources button where you can have a look at industry sector reports, and what we're doing is we're running our own natural language named entity recognition processes over data, and then comparing it.
Did we lose Dixon, or have we lost me?
Have you lost me?
Andrea, can you say something?
Yeah, I hear perfectly both you and Dixon.
Right. Oh,
Okay.
sorry. Who did we lose?
Carry on talking then, Jason.
We haven't lost anyone. We're still
sorry,
here.
it's me. Excuse me. I do apologise. Excuse me.
Okay, so we have some industry reports that trying to compare the named entity recognitions that we're looking at versus what Google looks at around any kind of concept, and we can see that there's a disconnect. It's very good at picking up organizations and brands. It's not so good at picking up ideas and concepts. And it's got a way to go. So it's an interesting set of reports that you can have a look at from the Index.net side. If you go on to the next slide, here's my last tip. Andrea, could you tell Jason to go on to the next slide?
Jason, can you go to the next slide?
Aha, I have. But it looks like my connection's messed up.
All right.
Okay, not to worry. I'll tell you what, I'm going to just talk about the next slide and then go on to there. So, okay. I'll just say hello to everybody then. So the topics idea is the last bit of my tips. What we're using now is, and hopefully will come out next week with, is a trend graph, a market trend intelligence system, which is going to be looking at how topics and ideas. Oh, there you go. Excellent. Don't press any buttons. How topics and ideas are trending over weeks and months. So we've got some ideas where we can take this one's antibacterial soap, and you can see that there was a big spike in the concept of antibacterial soap over the last month, and it's now come back down. But there's still a demand for antibacterial soap. Can you press the next one button, Jason? And whereas this one is hydroxychloroquine, something that Trump thinks is really cool, and that has suddenly had some big spikes and is coming back down again as well. So we've kind of taken all of the topics, or a lot of the topics, tens of thousands of topics, and you can go and have a look and see the trends over days or weeks. And the idea here is that we're discovering new ideas. So as a new idea pops up, it'll pop into the system, and you can see new ideas. And we hope that will be good for content writers, for SEOs, and eventually for businesses as well. So basically, identifying topics and then being able to look at the trends of them is my last tip. Okay, and that's it. So if you press the next button, I think that's me.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I love that. I'm so obsessed with brand SERPs, I'd forgotten there were topics as well. Andrea, off you go.
All right. So I'm a CEO of WordLift. I've been focusing on automating SEO and bringing some semantics to it. I built my first website in 1996. I've been doing digital marketing for a long time, and I'm happy to be here. So let's get started.
Yep.
And so the first tip is that same as links are indeed extremely important for getting your presence out in Knowledge Graph and helping Google, Bing, and other machine properly disambiguate your entity. And in the beginning, I really, I thought, this is going to be the new links. This is going to completely replace, the href links. And in a way, it's happening, because in a way we can see the impact as we saw before on the interaction of my SERP with Jason SERP. It's all built on these links that are referencing data. And so the first tip for you is to use structured data and get to the level of understanding that you are not linking only content, but you can link data with other data. And so this is our tool that is available for WordPress and for any other website, and that you can use for creating this knowledge graph that describe yourself and your companies and your product. And ready for the next one. So the other important tip for you is that you should link your data with other people's data, and that's really a core concept of linked data that has been introduced by the inventor of the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee, a long time ago. So here we see my entity within Wikidata, which is a publicly available giant graph. And you can see that I am creating links, much I would do from one page to another, from the entity to its equivalent entity on other websites that are using WordLift. And in this particular example, we are using a WordLift ID, which is a property inside the Wikidata ontology that allows people on Wikidata to create backlinks to data that you publish with WordLift. So it's interesting because, I mean, and that's also a question I have for Dixon. And how are these data links different from the good old links that you have been working for so long with? What do you think?
Well, I think that they've got a bit more structure to them, but there's nothing to stop Google from deciding a link, a typical old-fashioned hyperlink, is a relationship in the same way that schema-based links are connecting things together. I think, though, that what happened was that they set up a new team for developing the knowledge graph, and the new team thought about things in slightly different ways and didn't necessarily use traditional links as a significant signal for this kind of thing. So I think that they can connect each other, but I don't think they're necessary. They're different sides of the same kind of idea. But I think they're keen to keep they kept these. I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think they kept these two ideas of, you know, a PageRank based approach and an entity based approach reasonably separate within Google, and they were fighting for meritocracy in search results really over the years. But I think in the end, entity approaches are going to just win out, just because you cannot have a database that has trillions and trillions of web pages that are all indexed all the way through. There comes a point where scale becomes an issue, and the value of that diminishes as they find 200,000 pages on how to tie a bow tie. Really, one is enough, you know. So the concept.
That's a brilliant point of the scaling issue, and saying actually the PageRank Ahref links system can't scale far enough or fast enough. And one of the reasons perhaps we're advancing so quickly, or Google are moving forward so quickly, is because they're now much more entity-based search.
Yeah, I totally agree with the fact that these are two separate systems. And as a proof, we also noticed that the actual crawlers that get on our Triple Store, which is where we publish the data for everyone that is using a product. And the Triple Store is, for instance, you know, where we connect data with other data like Wikidata or DBpedia. We saw that the crawlers, the classes of IP from Google that arrive are not the same classes of IPs of the crawlers that we get on the HTML pages. And that was kind of a proof of what you just say, that, you know, these are kind of two separate systems, but one is a type link. So it's a link where I have the structure to understand what type is that relationship, and the other one is an untyped link, which of course it's by nature very, very messy.
Yeah. I think that's pretty interesting. If you're seeing IP ranges that are outside the published, well, I say the published, the known IP ranges, are they still coming from Mountain View? Did you do geo look up on those IP addresses?
They were coming pretty much from Mountain View, yes. But it's always a different cluster. It's never the same that you know the Google bot uses. But I think what is interesting is that, of course, when you have a type relationship, then you can infer new facts just by creating queries across, you know, multiple data sets. And that's you know, the beauty of federating data into linked data, is that, you know, you can come into Wikidata, and then currently you can go into Wikidata and you can ask, like, who is doing SEO that is also using WordLift, and you can get a response from Wikidata that collects the data from both us and Wikidata. So you know, when you create this structure, you can really you know, transfer knowledge about yourself and your product at a wider scale. And it's not just Google that is using, you know, this data, because I mean, WordLift uses this data, and you know, a lot of other people use this data.
I think the interesting challenge for SEOs, I've seen an Andy Simpson question that I'd like to answer as well. The interesting thing for SEOs, of course, is that currently we're trying to get all this data into the knowledge graph, into the knowledge panels, etc. But the challenge for SEOs is then getting the engagement of the user back to your own brand. back to your own business. And so it's the challenge. The challenge now may be trying to help build the knowledge graph, but the actual challenge is helping the knowledge graph, getting the knowledge graph to help your business again. And
couldn't agree more.
That's
couldn't
the
agree
hardest
more.
challenge. You know.
I think that we have already passed the phase in which we are focusing on just building the entity data. Or I mean, I started doing this, back in 2014. When things were, coming up in the knowledge graph. So for me now, I don't see that as a challenge. I see, and I'm happy to see now that there is a lot of interest around structured data. But I think that the real game changer, as you say, is to create engagement with the user by structuring content, around larger graph. That's the real challenge. And we don't have to think about structured data as just a way to, get to the search engine at a faster pace, because that's yes, it's an immediate result, but the actual value comes from creating an interaction with the human behind the search engine that we try to feed.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
And we can move to the third tip, which is actually about these. So a lot of the focus that I see now in the industry, it's really about, okay, what type of snippet should I get, and what type of visibility can I get, and that's really part of the ROI, which is immediate. I started to sell structured data in 2011, and in 2011, schema.org was just started, and it was very hard sell because there were no impact, of using schema.org on your web pages. But now we are in 2020, and we should go way beyond just thinking about, hey, what type of snippet do I get? And so here we see that the work that we're doing with Jason on his website is about working on a content model for providing visibility to its podcast and using schema and the knowledge graph in order to represent the relationship inside the content to the users and not only to the machine. I mean, of course, the machine is a consequence, but he had one page, and now he has a nice navigation that moves the user from the page of the podcast to the page of the contributor to the page of the event where the podcast was recorded. And so my advice for you is it's really to make sure that you understand schema not only as a way to get the rich snippet, but as a way to reorganize and remodel your content. And if you're not thinking this way, get on board, because that's really the most important aspect of it.
Yeah, what struck me about this experiment we're doing is the first thing was I had to sit down and think, how did I organize this, or how should I organize it? And that made me think about the podcast slightly differently. And so I had to think about how it would all be structured, which is, as you said, podcast series with podcast episodes recorded at events with different contributors. But secondly as well, what am I going to do moving forwards? And it's forced me to think about existing content and also what I'm now going to do in terms of my content strategy. And forcing you to think about how you're structuring things shows you often how badly structured your ideas are in the first place. Thank you. That was brilliant. I loved everything both of you said. I now regret what I said. But we're now on to the questions. Dixon, you said there was one you wanted to answer.
Andy Simpson. So I'll read out Andy's because I'll put it on the. So I've got an unclaimed knowledge panel for a client brand search. However, I'd rather the company's GMB listing to appear instead, as it's much stronger in appearance. I can also track links from my GMB. So can I request my knowledge panel to be removed? Oh, okay. So actually, the question was, can I request my knowledge panel to be removed? I would say. That you and I there's two other experts here and one can override me. I don't see any reason why you can't have both, but one of the reasons that I screwed up in the beginning is I tried to mix my GMB listing and my personal branding, and they're quite heavily overlapped. So I think that there's no reason why you can't have both there. And if you've got an unclaimed KP, I'd still claim it. Because otherwise somebody else will try, or it won't get claimed. But you can still get your GMB listing to appear, at least when it's supposed to.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Andrea.
No. Go, Jason.
For me, this actually brings in a boatload of questions and a boatload of problems. I mean, what's Google doing? It's showing what it thinks is the most relevant and valuable to the user searching your brand name. So if it's showing the knowledge panel instead of the Google My Business, then it thinks that that's the most valuable to the person. And what I found is it often shows the Google My Business at the top and then the knowledge panel underneath for local businesses. But increasingly, when you're not a local searcher, i.e. you're not in the area where the local business is located, it will show the knowledge graph. And today I was looking at my sister's knowledge panel, but I also started looking, and I was trying to find out, Dixon, as you were pointing out, how many knowledge panels appear without knowledge graph presence and how many knowledge graph presence don't result in a knowledge panel appearing. And as you rightly said, the second is much, much bigger. And what I noticed is an awful lot of local businesses are being shifted over to the knowledge graph as well. I found absolutely loads, and I haven't had the time to research the data yet, but that's going to be an increasing problem. As a local business, you're going to want to manage which one's being shown, but you have no control. You can't just say to Google, I don't want the knowledge panel, because it will keep it. So as Dixon says, you better claim it because it's the only control you're going to get. All you can do is try and influence it, but it's always going to show what it feels is most valuable for its users. Andrea.
So, yeah, I just want to add a very tactical suggestion here, which is very simple. Now, and which was one of my tips, which is like, add data links. Now, there is a very important property in Schema that allows you to do exactly what you need, which is Schema as map. Now, Schema as map can be used for inside an entity type of organization to connect the entity of your organization with the GMB. So there is a way for you to take control of the connection between the main entity and the GMB, because the HasMap property allows you to create this link, and the value that you will place, it's actually the Google Maps link that you get for your GMB. And that's a fantastic way to tell Google, hey, this organization, it's linked to this Google My Business. And that gives you control, because at the end, I mean, Google My Business, as Jason and Dixon say, they will appear for local searches only. If you look at WordLift as an example, we do have both. And we do have the Bing Places and the Google My Business. And when you're in Rome, when you're around us, then that would be more prominent. But otherwise, you would get the knowledge graph, the presentation of our organization as a software company, and I'm totally okay with it. I mean, I have to have this control. I mean, I do have this extra level of control by linking data inside my pages, and that's I think super powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of, what I like to bear in mind as well is Google My Business is a business listing. It's like the Yellow Pages. Yeah. The knowledge panel is something completely different. It's saying this is a fact about a company that you don't control, and that's the point of it. Whereas Google My Business, you have control. It's a business listing. And the fact that Google's shifting them over to the knowledge graph is an interesting development. And if you track around the world, I mean, Kalicube tracks around the world at several countries, you do see the knowledge graph will appear when we're not local and not when we are. Anyway, so brilliant stuff. I had a question as well, if we may just finish with one last question, because somebody asked about the cameos, and we're going to post that into the chat. Andrea, how did you get them?
So it's an invite only. It's really a search experiment. So you have to get to some level of cloud. I don't have this cloud. I don't know. Probably they got me wrong, but probably they were looking another Andrea Volpini. But nevertheless,
you've got Wikipedia, mate. You're fine.
No, I don't. I don't have Wikipedia. WordLift has a Wikipedia, but Andrea doesn't have one. And actually, my challenge.
You're well in there.
My challenge when I started was really, what can people do if they are not notable enough to end up into Wikipedia? And that's really when we started with this idea of publishing personal knowledge graph that, enables everyone to become, their own Wikipedia. And I think that's fundamental. So Cameos is still an invite only, but it's super interesting because it will create questions for you based on the facets that the knowledge graph holds. about your entity. So one requirement for getting into Cameos is, of course, having your entity into the Google Knowledge Graph. And then the second requirement is that you have multiple facets, so they know at least the occupation. And because that's why for me it only asks me about how many companies you founded and things about starting up new companies, because that's what I do.
So once you're in, they build up kind of, or they send you the questions based on what they know about
that's
you
correct.
that they think might be interesting
correct.
for their users, which is completely logical. They're trying to get you to provide content to their users on their SERP. Once again, I have one last question that I'd like to throw out to two of you, because it's something that I'm really kind of concerned about, is the idea of schema markup. It doesn't have an immediate payback, except maybe these pretty things in the SERP. How do you sell it to your boss? Andrea, how do you sell it to your boss if it's not the pretty SERP features and you can say, well, I got this extra
I sold it in 2011. So imagine now it's super easy. I mean, the ROI at the moment for schema is so easy to demonstrate that we are getting to the point where with some enterprise clients, we actually look at the number of clicks that WordLift can generate for them in the next few months. And usually we see an uptake, on average after the first month of using WordLift in the proper way. So it can be measured in clicks, and then you just use the conversion rate and whatever business value you have behind these conversions, and then you calculate if it's worth the effort or not. Of course, you don't need to structure everything. You have to focus where the core of your business lies. But right now, ROI structured data, not an issue.
Okay, brilliant. Dixon, your point of view on that?
I got a bit. I was having a look at Simon Cox's thing there, and I said yes to Simon Cox. I agree, but so I missed the question. I heard the answers. I heard Andrew's answer, but I didn't hear the question. But we're probably out of time anyway. Okay,
fair enough. Right, brilliant. Well, thank you very much to everybody. Pity we didn't get that answer, but
back to Joe.
We'll hand it back to SEO Joe Bloggs and Kerry Shepherd from Authoritas. Thank you very much for having the three of us to talk about that. And I believe this carries on next week, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. But we can have time for that answer that you wanted.
You've got to ask the question again.
What was the question?
Well, I mean, it was basically the idea of schema markup. I mean, I know a lot of bosses or clients are reticent about it because they can't see the immediate value. Andrea said that with WordLift, they can predict that there's going to be more clicks and therefore more sales. Yeah. So we can maybe give a prediction of click sales and value. Is there another way you can do it?
Well, you can. I mean, and certain types of schema are very easy to show, of course, because if you suddenly start paying for FAQ schema and stuff like that, and you're the only one that's answering the question, then that's a pretty good sign. We're experimenting. We're doing experiments right now with web page same as schema, and we got around about we got 30 different SEOs playing with things where they're just putting the schema in and then seeing the changes in the rankings and stuff, so that we'll be able to hopefully have a decent case study to demonstrate, at least on web page schema, that schema has a value for the core algorithm, and that will be pretty valuable from our point of view. So we think that once they get it, and that's why I try and describe it in this sort of this single point of truth, the Google kind of concept, because then a CEO or a CMO says, oh, bugger, it's not my website that's important, it's my, in your case, Jason, you'd call it brand. In Andrew's case, he'd call it, your knowledge graph. But basically, it's not just your website, it's everything that counts.
Okay, brilliant stuff. So we're going to be looking for case studies to be coming out to actually prove the ROI of this stuff, to get the bosses and the clients on board when they're reticent today. Thank you very much. Joe.
Well, thank you very much to Jason for hosting us today, and thank you very much to our speakers for coming on board for Tea Time SEO. If you do have your cake and tea ready, you can always be baking this weekend and send some photos of your view of your Tea Time SEO. I'll pass over to Kerry for some concluding remarks. Thank you.
Hi guys. So just remember that we have all our blog has got some talks from last week and some from this week going up, summaries. And we will see you next week with Victoria, Naomi, and Hannah sharing their tips on favorite SEO tactics that work. So see you next week. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Ciao,
you.
ciao.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.